Hi, I'm Lenny Pepperbottom. Me and Theodore Roethke think that nature is one of the neatest things in this planet. So, that's why we're making this video, so you guys can know too, instead of just me and Theodore knowing it. Now, as you can see, what I have here is some green leaves. There's a lot of green in nature. It's pretty neat. Which leads me to my next point. Theodore's father had a 25-acre greenhouse. That's a lot of green. Anyways, furthermore, that's why a lot of his poems are based off of nature. How neat is that? As you can see here, we have a lot of dead leaves. Speaking of death, when Theodore turned 14, his father died of cancer and his uncle committed suicide. That's a bummer, and will probably bring people down. Anyways, he later described himself as unhappy and a little eccentric. Man, how neat is that? Good one, Rodney. Oh, wow! Oh, this is an aspen. You can tell it's an aspen because of the way it is. Theodore Roethke attended University of Michigan at Ann Arbor. He had a good time there, but he developed a really bear-like image, gained 225 pounds, and grew a beard. Poet and writer James Dickey became his friend. He really wanted a friend. Dickey said, "Hey, you've got gut vitality, and it's super deep, and you go deep, and Whitman's got nothing on you." It's pretty neat.
Alright, we gotta be quiet. I'm hoping to see an animal. That'd be a really neat cap for this nature day. But we gotta be careful, because it might be a bear. And if it's a bear, you gotta make yourself look bigger. That'll scare him off. Speaking of bears, Theodore Roethke decided he wanted to pursue teaching and poetry as a career. He earned an MA and a BA at the University of Michigan, and after a while dropped out of the law program there. He didn't want to be a lawyer like everybody else he knew. And that's pretty neat, but more neater than that was the ant that was just on my ankle. Wasn't that pretty neat? Anyways, yeah. Hey Rodney, do you think you see a bear? You should make yourself look bigger. Good job, Rodney.
You know what's brown and sticky? A stick. You gotta keep some jokes on the nature walks. It'll keep you more occupied. Speaking of occupied, during Roethke's first 15 years of being a poet, he also attended Harvard Law School, just so he could hang out and chill and learn with Robert Killier. That's a pretty cool name. I like it. And later on, during those times, he had to leave because of the Great Depression. Man, that must have been depressing. Anyways, he eventually went on and put out more work. But the problem was he had to deal with a lot of good poets that time. Wow, this is a pretty neat plant. I think it's pretty cool. The important part of nature walking is to keep a notebook. I don't have mine on me today, but you can keep it and then you can put really cool stuff in it. And yeah, speaking of notebooks, that's where much of Roethke's writing came from, because he kept a notebook and he liked to talk about it. Yeah, it's pretty neat.
I forgot to press record. It's happening.
This is a really pretty plant. And the sad part and angry part about this plant is that it'll die. And that shows that there can be bad things in beauty in nature. That's why a lot of Roethke's poems were written quite beautifully, but he wrote a lot about death. It's kind of sad, but still pretty cool. He opened up his first book, Open House. It had a lot of really neat poems on it. Open House got a lot of good and bad reviews, but all of them said that he was really good at writing. And he kept the good ones because he wanted to be praised for his work, but he didn't always try to please the other people because he wanted to stay true to himself, because that's what he said made good poetry. You can see that a lot in a lot of his poems. they're pretty sad, but he talks about himself. It's not always about a lot of other people, which people are cool, but you're pretty neat too. Theodore Roethke really liked to get introspective and talk about himself a lot. So in this poem, The Journey into Thyself talks a lot about him. It says, "In the long journey out of the self, there are many detours, washed out, interrupted, raw places where the shell slides dangerously, and the back wheels hang almost over the edge. At this turning of the veering, the moment of turning, better to hug close, wary of rubble and falling stones, the arroyo cracking the road, the wind-bitten puddles to the canyons. Creeks swollen in the midsummer from the flash flood roaring into the narrow valley, reeds beaten flat by wind and rain, gray from the long winter, burn at the base in late summer, or the path narrowing, winding upward toward the stream with its sharp stones, the upland of alder and birch trees, through the swamp alive with quicksand, the way blocked at last by fallen fir tree, and thickets darkening, their vines ugly." Now, I don't know about you, that sounds like he's talking a lot about himself. Seems a little bit sad and depressing, but he likes that. He's a sad and depressed guy. He later described himself as odious. Now that's a bad word. Not a bad word, but a word that means bad. Anyways, that was pretty neat. And don't you love the little beauties nature gives us? Yeah! Now, nature can do a lot of weird things. Like this. Speaking of weird, this is what we call a pine cone. Early settlers of this region thought it was tree poop, and when they'd step on it, they'd be like, I got tree poop on my tootsies. This fact was later disproven in 1948 by Dr. Gernshaw of the University of Nebraska at Lincoln. Speaking of funny and eccentric, Theodore Roethke was one of those teachers. It was said at one point he walked out his window and then asked along making faces at other classes. He told a kid, hey, you gotta have rhythm, kind of like that poem he wrote that I just read. He said, you gotta have rhythm. I don't care if you're dancing naked in a barn door with a chalk in your navel. You've gotta have rhythm. Rhythm was important to Roethke, as you can see in most of his poems. Hey Rodney, tree poop! In 1935, Roethke had his first mental breakdown, sending him to a sanitarium. He explained in his work it was because of teaching. He was going from exhaustion to exhaustion. Exhaustion's something you really got to watch out for in nature, because it's kind of neat looking around and all, but you got to take yourself okay and rest a little bit. Always a good idea to carry snacks. Always snacks. Moving on, he had another mental breakdown in 1943, and they continued to ensue throughout this point. He had a lot of crazy stuff during that time, but it was still pretty neat, and I like it a lot. And it got a lot more manic and depressing because he suffered from manic depression. To further prove that this guy was a crazy cat, he said he liked his mental illness because it said he opened himself up to look inside himself. Whether he did this literally or figuratively, no one knows to this day. Roethke came out later with The Lost Son, and followed by It Prays the End. Both were really neat because they offered a lot of interior monologues, because he was talking to himself a lot, because he looked at himself. For The Lost Son, which was the title poem, they kind of set the standard for the rest of the book. Roethke said that you should come reading the poems as a child, because it's a lot better that way, and it'll make more sense. And people did it, and they really thought it was neat. Theodore Roethke got married, started reading into philosophy and religion, which a lot of it comes from nature. And those were what influenced him to write Words for the Wind and The Far Field. There are a lot of love poems written towards his wife, and it's pretty neat. Camouflage is always really important whenever you're in nature, because you might want to see some wild animals, like an antelope, or a fox, or a biting goat. Anyways, it's pretty cool. Back to Theodore Roethke. He died in 1963 from a heart attack in a swimming pool. Must have ate. Gotta wait 30 minutes, folks. Anyways, he later won the National Book Award in 1965 for The Far Field. It was a really good book, and a lot of people liked it. I thought it was pretty neat, but, you know, that's just me. Throughout Roethke's life, you can see that there was a lot of depression and a lot of craziness, but later it calmed down when he finally got married. You see a lot of love and a lot of his wife, but it's all from him and from a personal perspective, and it's really neat, and you should check it out sometime. Anyways, that concludes it for this series of Neature Walk. Bye, guys.